Hey everybody, Method Marine and I plan on doing a video live stream later, probably not today, but in the near future, where we analyze Stranger Things and the movie Johnny Darko. But ahead of time, I kind of wanted to just take a specific look at the White Rabbit and going down the rabbit hole. So going down the rabbit hole is sort of like a metaphor for when you start waking up and seeing the signs and symbolism and the truth behind a lot of the things that you've been taught through life that you take for granted as being what things look like on the surface, so to speak. So if you're new to this, you may want to just keep an open mind, watch it till the end, and then hopefully by keeping an open mind, it'll make you curious to want to do a little bit more research. So, any event, the first thing I kind of want to talk about is with the rabbit and the rabbit hole. Ultimately, this might be a lot to take in at one time, but I think that the rabbit hole and the rabbit, etc., has something to do with time travel, if you will. And I'm going to lay out my case for why I think that is a possibility. So keep an open mind, listen to what I'm saying, watch it till the end, and if you disagree with me, that's fine. Just leave a comment, let me know why. I respect your opinion regardless. And if you agree with me or if you have more ideas on the subject, please leave a comment afterwards too. Let me know. In any event, to begin with rabbits, I want to talk about the magicians. You know how you have like a magic performer and they pull a rabbit out of their hat, so to speak. Well, in the occult, like as in Stranger Things, they have something called the upside down world. And that's not really a new concept. That goes back to fairy tales and whatnot. I mean, among other things. And all these subjects are all interconnected, so you just kind of bear with me on it. But if you look at a fairy tale, they, according to those old stories, part of the way you see them or get them to avoid you, etc., is you put your clothes on backwards. If you put your clothes on backwards, or your shirt is inside out, etc., then in theory you're supposed to make you more susceptible or provide protection or whatever from the fairy world, which is like an upside down world to this world. And in fairy world, time doesn't exist. It works differently. So if, let's say, for example, you're abducted and taken away by gnomes or whatever, and you're brought to that realm, then what might seem like a day to you is actually a year, 100 years, 1,000 years, etc., to them. So if you come back to this world from, let's say, being abducted by fairies, etc., then time doesn't exist the way it does here. So it's sort of like time travel in a sense. And I know I've said this before, but if you look at, like, say, the spiritual realm, theoretically time doesn't exist there like it does here in this three-dimensional space of this plane of existence that we live in here. So, because, like, for example, God is timeless, so in heaven there is no such thing as time, or in other spiritual realms, if you will, there is no such thing as time. So with the again, looking at the upside down world, if you look at like a magician's hat, think of it like a rabbit hole that's upside down. So when they're wearing it on their head, it's sort of like an upside down rabbit hole. And when they take the hat off and put the hat upside down, then it becomes like right side up for the rabbit, and that allows the rabbit to exit the hat like it's its cave or rabbit hole, if you will. So it's sort of like a dimension or gateway, or that's the implication or symbolism of that. in my opinion. I could be wrong. It's just the way I'm looking at it. In my conjecture, I guess I should say. But so I think that the magic hat is sort of related to like a wizard's hat. Has that conical shape. So they're shaped differently, but they kind of serve the same purpose as like a gateway, if you will, sort of, or symbolizes that in some way. You know, wizard's hat, witch's hat, they're all kind of have that same kind of conical shape. And I've seen diagrams for time travel, and they have that kind of conical shape as well, where you have where the past and the future kind of are like upside down worlds, if you will, that are connected at this the point where the two cones meet, where they're polar opposites of each other, but they have a meeting point, and that meeting point I would assume is where time travel theoretically would be possible. So there's a connection between the wizard's hat for magic versus the illusionist or magician's black top hat magic hat, related to cones and time travel or portals, if you will. Like the rabbit hole, which we're going to go into more detail with, is a bit of a portal. So that started getting me thinking about other rabbits in stories and whatnot. And there is a story a lot of people are familiar with called Watership Down. And if you are familiar with either the animated version of that, or or if you've read the story itself, Watership Down is about these rabbits that are that live in a community under the ground in their rabbit hole. And one of the rabbits has the ability to foretell the future. And so he sees a series of calamities that are headed towards that rabbit community. And so he tries to warn everybody, say, hey, you know, all this bad stuff's going to happen. We need to bail. Let's get out of here. Let's leave the rabbit hole and go find a new place to live. And I don't want to bore you with all the details of the story of Watership Down, which actually might be a reference to the Philadelphia experiment, where the Navy was trying to make a battleship invisible. So they're using technology to achieve that end. And inadvertently, what ended up happening is they lost the battleship. It vanished. So they achieved that end, but with an unintended effect of having the battleship that they made invisible disappear. Like literally, it vanished. It wasn't there anymore. And then it reappeared decades later, but with the crew of that battleship in the Philadelphia experiment becoming one with the ship, like they were, like the body and the ship, bodies of a sailor, etc., were kind of interwoven with the fibers of the metal of the actual ship. They got fused together in that time travel experiment, if you will, the Philadelphia experiment. So perhaps Watership Down, like a watership, maybe they're linked somehow. I don't know. Just throwing that out there. But in any event, the story revolves around the protagonist, who is a rabbit, who's clairvoyant, if you will, is able to see the future. So then that brings me to my next point, which is talking about how far back all this stuff goes. So recently, or relatively recently anyway, I think it was in the 90s, or maybe, it's probably later than like 2000 or something. Yeah, I think it was 2000, I think about it, 2001. I forget after a while, but there was a movie called Donnie Darko, and me and Method and Marine will go into that in more detail later. But in the movie Donnie Darko, the main protagonist, Donnie, is about to be killed by a falling piece of an airplane that crashes through his house and slams into his room. but he ends up being saved by a rabbit, and this rabbit tells him, "Hey, get out of the house." And then I don't want to ruin that whole story ahead of time, but basically, the rabbit in Donnie Darko foretells the future, and that movie has to do with telling the future, and it involves a rabbit with some very, very dark imagery. So I'm not going to go into here. We'll talk about that later. But one of the things that stands out to me about the rabbit in Donnie Darko that is able to tell the future is it's related to a movie from a long time ago, like a black and white movie, like old school movie days with Jimmy Stewart, where Jimmy Stewart also sees a rabbit. It's like an invisible rabbit that no one else can see but him, in a movie called Harvey. And in the movie Harvey, everyone thinks he's nuts, kind of like Donnie Darko. But he's the only one who could see this big, like 6'3" rabbit, and only he can see it. And that's not where the similarity ends, though, because also in the movie Harvey, which I recommend you guys see if you have a chance. It's a good movie, by the way, but it is a movie, so you get the programming as far as that goes. But in the movie Harvey, though, the rabbit is able to stop time. It has that ability. So let's say, for example, if Jimmy Stewart's character didn't have enough time to like say mow his yard and then go wash dishes or see a friend or whatever, he could just have the rabbit Harvey stop time for him, and then he could get all that stuff done, and it's as if not even a second has gone by. So that's a time travel thing in Harvey. With that, the rabbit in Harvey, which relates back to the rabbit, which has time traveling abilities in the movie Donnie Darko. Now, in the movie Harvey, technically, the rabbit, if you will, is a puka. A puka is like this Celtic mythological entity that's a shape changer. It has the ability to change what form it takes on. So that reminds me of something that goes on beyond that. So I was talking to Bianca the other day, and we were talking about how far back this stuff goes, because it goes at least as far back as I think it's the 50s or the 40s, whenever the movie Harvey was made. I think it's like 1950, if I can be exact. And so we were thinking, wow, this stuff goes back a long ways. And I was just thinking, well, maybe it goes back even farther than that. Because before the 50s, like way, way far back, like 2,000 years ago or so, so a couple millennia ago, back in ancient Britain, the UK and all that, before it became the UK, there was a warrior queen there named Boudica. I think Boudica means victory. And so Boudica was a Celtic queen that lived at that time. And that's related, in a sense, to the puka, which comes from that same part of the world. That's that Celtic mythology, the puka, the shape changer, the rabbit, if you will, from Harvey. So in that story with Boudica from history, she was a queen, and her father, before she was a queen, she was a princess, if you will, and her father was the king. At that time, all these Celtic tribes were kind of individual. They were divided. They were like little city-states, which had loyalties bound through, clans and whatnot, family relations to whoever was the chief or the head of that clan, the king, if you will. And not all tribes got along. There was a lot of conflict in that culture. So what happened was Rome was unified at the time. Rome was like the global power, if you will. They're sort of like the superpower of the ancient world. What happened was Rome created an alliance with the Iceni. I think that's the name of that tribe that Boudica was a princess of, and they had profited from that relationship with Rome. But what ended up happening was after Boudica's father, the king, died. Then, according to the rules of that culture, she was supposed to be queen, and then she was supposed to be in charge. And what happened was Rome was basically kind of pulled a fast one and was like, you know what, sorry, too bad, but we're taking over now because we don't, in our culture, don't respect uh, women having power or the ability to pass down roles of authority, etc. So all your property now belongs to Rome. So she was like, I don't think so. This isn't right. And so, to make a long story short, the Romans beat her and raped her and raped her daughter. I think it was. I mean, it was brutal, and it was just like total thug style. And so so there she was. She was insulted. Everything she was taking, she was beaten. Everything she knew and was due to her heritage and um, last will or whatever inheritance was taken from her, and she was beaten and raped. And it's hard to imagine a whole lot that could be worse than that. And so, of course, she was upset, and she's like, "What? Oh, I don't think so. This is above and beyond the call of anything that I'm willing to just accept. So it's time for some payback." So she's gathering her armies together to fight Rome, and she's with a full-on wanted vengeance, big time. And so she wanted to make sure that she attacked at a time that was which would be at her advantage or good luck for her or whatever. So what she did was she took a rabbit, and as a ritual, she let the white rabbit go from her grasp to see which direction the rabbit ran in. And I don't understand that ritual, but it has something to do with predicting the future. So the white rabbit, at least as far back as 2,000 years ago, in Boudica's time in ancient Britain, it was used to tell or prognosticate the future. So I don't want to bore you with all the details of Boudica, but let's just say, she went out and raised an army and just basically, it ended up in warfare where a lot of people ended up dying and whatnot. And it ended tragically. But that's not the point of this. The point is that white rabbit was used to foretell the future. And I think that might be related to, like, say, things like Easter with the Easter bunny and whatnot, which might seem ridiculous. But we're going to break that down and get to that in a minute. So just keep an open mind, listen, and think for yourself and come to your own conclusions. But in any event, Easter has to do with the dawn. That's why you see all those eggs that are they're kind of like solar symbols. I think the egg and the colors that you see at Easter are all these pastel colors, like you see yellow and light blues and really light pastel purples and pinks and all that. And those colors are related to the dawn. All right, and Easter has to do with like the equinoxes. It's sort of like a springtime thing, where there's equal time in the spring for light as well as darkness. So it has that. It's one of those times that in the occult that they put as a special status. So Easter and the dawn in the ancient British Isles, in my opinion, would have been related to someone named Bridget or Breed, or there's different pronunciations and spellings for those names. But Bridget was a goddess of the dawn who the Catholic Church appropriated and turn into Saint Bridget. Um, but basically, the myth, as I understand it, is for that dawn goddess is that a lot of people don't know this about her, but like she would have been um, half light and half darkness. Like her face would be divided down the middle, or half of it would be dark and the other half would be light. And the reason for that is because she's like the dawn goddess, so she would come out while it's not quite day, but it's not quite night either. So it's like half and half, half dark, half light, half black, half white, etc. Um, and so that whole rabbit thing was probably linked to her and the dawn. Um, and so the if so the other thing, the point I wanted to make is that in some strange way, the rabbit, um, regarding Easter and whatnot, and springtime and the equinox, as well as the dawn sky, has some solar significance. So probably a lot of people haven't realized that before. And I'm, to my knowledge, the first person who's recognizing this is that if you think about it, the rabbit is being a solar image or symbol, etc., is that the rabbit burrows underground. That makes its hole, or its rabbit hole, if you will. And so the rabbit has ties to the underworld. That's so it's like it has, it makes it's the rabbit's the one that punches the hole that makes its way through to a different dimension or time travel. Um, and the solar significance in that, I think, has something to do with how um, when the sun leaves the sky and darkness descends, it kind of makes its rabbit hole. It kind of burrows in, image-wise, like into the earth. It kind of buries its head, if you will. And then when it comes back up again, it's like it's leaving the rabbit hole. It's coming back out again. And specifically a white rabbit, because white is like kind of like the sun. It's bright, has a solar imagery behind it. And if you look back at Easter, it's probably related to, I think, Ishtar, Easter, right? They're kind of like related words. And there's imagery of Ishtar, which I think relates to Isis, if you will. So Isis, Ishtar, Easter, Oster, Bridget, etc. It's all kind of interlinked, I guess. And so I realize the obvious one is that rabbits, like breeding like rabbits, that they have this like sexualized metaphor for their ability to procreate. So I suppose there's that issue with springtime and Easter as well. No doubt, I'm sure that's part of it. But I think what gets lost on people is the solar imagery of rabbits and going down the rabbit hole, and time travel, if you will. So that has to do with Easter, Ishtar. Oh, the other thing is like the eggs. That's kind of a side thing, but those have a really dark imagery as well, which is solar, I think, like the sun. Maybe they were owl eggs at one time rather than chicken eggs. Owls, for the being able to see in the darkness, like the occult, the eye that can see. But yeah, so that whole thing has dark imagery, which goes back to probably like Moloch or something, and but that's for another time. But anyway, yeah. And then if you look at, like, say, Alice in Wonderland, where she goes down the rabbit hole. Alice in Wonderland, she's following the rabbit, and as she goes down into the rabbit hole and she has her adventures in Wonderland, she loses track of time, like in Fairy World. So she's like a time traveler, if you will. And then when she wakes up, it seems like just a few minutes have gone by. Well, for her, it's been this whole adventure that she's had in Wonderland. And who does she follow there is the rabbit. And the rabbit also has the clock, the watch that tells time. And the rabbit's like, I'm late. I got to get out of here. So there you have the connection between the rabbit hole, time, and the watch. So the rabbit is, once again, it's the time traveler. Um, so I think I'm just about getting towards the end of this then. So I might have missed something. I think there were some other things I wanted to talk about. Um, but I guess in essence, that's it. So if I left something out, I'll try to write it in the comment section later. Seems like I was forgetting some other rabbit thing in there. Oh, maybe like like on cereal boxes, the tricks rabbit. Like it's a trick, I guess. But anyway, there you go. Rabbits, the rabbit hole. It all has to do with time travel and dimensions and portals. The rabbit hole is a portal to another dimension, if you will. It's a solar symbol, and there you have it again. The dawn, if you will, with Easter and all that. You get all those pastel colors that you get around Easter time, with like the light pinks and purples and blue, yellow, etc. So I think we're about in. So let me know your thoughts. Am I right? Am I wrong? Is there more you want to add to it? Just keep an open mind. Let me know what your thoughts are. Try to be polite regardless. And it's okay to disagree with me. I don't mind. And I hope you all have a wonderful day. God bless you all in Jesus' name.